Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is politics reporter Sara Dorn. As we sit here right now, we're less than 3 weeks away from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's ex-date deadline of June 1st for raising the debt limit. What are the major players, specifically President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, doing in terms of negotiations right now?
So today it's Tuesday, 4:30 p.m., and they just wrapped up their second meeting in a matter of weeks. That's congressional leaders Biden, McCarthy, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, in addition to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. So they just met again for the second time in a week to discuss this looming crisis. And it sounds like that Biden is reversing course a bit on his previous stance that he would refuse to negotiate on the debt limit and would refuse to agree to any bill that had any other conditions attached. So they seem to be working out some sort of a deal that will make its way through the Democratic-controlled Senate. The deal that passed the House a week ago is probably moot at this point, and the legislation will have to return to the House as well. Yes, but meetings are ongoing. McCarthy said following today's meeting that he hopes to get a deal done this weekend or before this weekend. One kink in that is Biden is scheduled to leave for a week-long overseas trip tomorrow. The White House has kind of said today that he could be willing to cancel that if they don't, move towards some sort of agreement within possibly the next 12 hours. So
McCarthy sounded much more optimistic than his remarks on Monday. He said this Tuesday, "I think we set the stage to carry on further conversations." So let's back up. I know that congressional leaders met with President Biden last week, but it seems like the conversations are much more productive now. Is that a correct assessment?
definitely after last week's meeting, neither side really had much more to say over the weekend. Staffers for McCarthy and Biden, congressional leaders met and kept the talks ongoing. And Biden on Sunday, he was in Delaware at the time, said that he was optimistic about the progress. And yesterday, some chatter began, White House and various congressional aides telling reporters that Biden was open to a few concessions. Now, as you mentioned, McCarthy yesterday seemed a lot less optimistic, but even some Republican congressional leaders have told Hill reporters, even following, McCarthy's comments yesterday, that they were not close to an agreement. And he even went as far to say that he believes that Democrats want a default rather than a deal. However, congressional aides, Republican congressional aides sort of told Hill reporters that was more posturing and acknowledged that the two sides were, moving forward towards an agreement. And, this is a small development, but a big one given the fact that they have been at an impasse for months now. So any progress is progress at this point, especially when, the so-called X date is as soon as 2 weeks away.
Small but positive progress, obviously, because that X date could mean a potential recession. Obviously, it's unprecedented. But as you mentioned, Democrats, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, along with President Joe Biden, originally said that they were only going to agree to raise the debt ceiling without any other conditions. But you mentioned some concessions. Can you elaborate what those concessions could be?
Yeah, so there is both sides are saying, congressional leaders at least, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said today that welfare work requirements, this is a GOP proposal that was included in their debt ceiling bill that passed the House last month. It would raise the age that people who receive food stamps and Medicaid are required to work in order to receive those benefits. The current age is 49. The GOP bill would raise it to 55. Back to Hakeem Jeffries, he said that this is a non-negotiable. However, McCarthy also said today that this is a red line for Republicans, that they will refuse to pass any debt ceiling bill that does not include an increase in the age requirement for welfare recipients. And Biden expressed some openness to that over the weekend as well. However, he sort of walked it back in a tweet on Monday, where he said that he was referring more so to raising the age for Medicaid recipients. And again, when I say raising the age, that's the age that Medicaid recipients and food stamp recipients are required to meet a minimum hour work threshold in order to receive these benefits. So that is one really hot button issue that is being discussed right now. In exchange for doing so, the White House has reportedly asked the GOP to take some of their other policy demands off the table.
Sara, you used phrases like red line, non-negotiables. We've heard dead on arrival for the bill that passed through the House. And when it comes to negotiations, those phrases are tough if you end up having to concede. And obviously, a deal needs to be made, and it needs to be made by June 1st. And for optics, no one obviously on a single side politically wants to look like they conceded more than the other. So what does a win look like for Republicans, and what does a win look like for Democrats?
Well, both sides, whatever happens, the most extreme members of either party, progressives on the Democratic side and conservatives, right-wing lawmakers on the Republican side, are going to be, decrying whatever, concessions Biden gave into. Progressives are going to be upset about those, and whatever concessions he did not make, right-wing lawmakers are going to be upset about those. So I don't think that everyone is going to end up happy at the end of the day, but just, accomplishing any debt limit bill in this split Congress and in this, this politically tumultuous environment, I think is going to be sort of a win for both parties, and will make the leaders of those parties at least look good. We talked about the welfare work requirements. I think if Republicans can push those through, as well as a provision that would speed up the process, the permitting process for energy projects, those would be two big wins for Republicans. And then there's also a lot of haggling over federal spending caps. It seems like the Biden administration is open to capping federal spending until the end of his term. However, Republicans want to extend that for 10 years. So that'll be another area to watch for as these negotiations play out.
Sara, we've been talking now for what I think is months on debt ceiling negotiations, and the theme of every conversation has been impasse, gridlock, stalemate. The synonym for that has been the theme of our conversation. For the first time, it seems like there actually is some tangible movement, which is great because that X date is nearing. But Mitch McConnell said last week the United States is not going to default. It never has, and it never will. And Tuesday's comments from Kevin McCarthy sound more promising than they have been in the past. So what's next in terms of what we know about debt limit talks?
Well, McCarthy again said today that he hopes to reach a deal by this weekend, which would really, bring the negotiations down to the wire, because it takes time for legislation to move through Congress, and there is only 1 week left in the month where the Senate and the House are simultaneously in session. So I think that we can expect, an announcement on a new bill again as soon as this weekend, or if not early next week. That legislation would move through both chambers of Congress and presumably be signed by Biden fairly quickly. So I think that we are nearing the end of this discussion, and neither side obviously neither side wants a default. That is really just not an option. And it never has been. Both sides are using this, or Republicans rather are using this debt limit fight to push some of their policy and spending priorities. And, again, Biden has taken the hardline stance that he wants to negotiate these spending cuts through the budget process. But it seems like Republican lawmakers are really forcing his hand here, as you said, since we only have 2 weeks left until this so-called X date.
Yeah, looking at that calendar, looking at the X date, I hope the next time I'm talking to you will be before June 1st, obviously, but I hope it's highlighting the end of these negotiations. Sara Dorn, per usual, thanks for your insights.
Thank you, Brittany.